Hello again, everybody, and it's wonderful to talk to all of you again in this Sail and Chat episode. So, what I'm going to do this episode? Well, I'm going to cover some of the, recent happenings that's going on warships in terms of contests and stuff like that, maybe events. And then I'm just going to talk about, an upcoming patch that might be coming out soon, and then the state of the game. And I really, really want to talk about that today. So, let's get started first of all with contests and events that are happening. On the North American server, nothing really much has happened, even though the holiday season is sort of right around the corner. There doesn't seem to be any major contests, although there seems to be a hint that the Bliskavika is coming into the store. Although, who knows, maybe Wargaming is just going to be super, super nice this Christmas and just give everybody on NA server that ship. Like, who am I kidding, right? Yeah, I don't think that's happening. On the other hand, though, EU seems to be having fun. They're just getting lots and lots of contests. From what I can count, there seems to be at least 2 right now. And so EU, that means you can totally stop complaining about NA getting everything. Although if we do get the Bliskavita, for free for the whole server, then you guys totally have the right to complain for the rest of eternity about that. Anyways, so the 2 major EU contests right now. There appears to be one that is based on taking screenshots of the highest experience that you earn in a ship, and then you can send that screenshot in and you can be eligible for prizes. The people apparently who enter that contest are eligible for things like, it's called the Rock the Boat contest, by the way, and they're eligible for things like a Razer headset, there's a ship model I think that you're eligible for, some mouse pads, maybe a marble head. And then there's people who, if you get the overall highest damage and overall highest experience, there is a GTX 950 and a Razer Leviathan soundbar for grabs there. So definitely check out the link in the video description below and for more details. There is a tip though, for those of you who are planning to enter that particular contest. If you're thinking about getting the highest experience, do a lot of capping in a battle. Caps give insane amounts of experience. The other day I was playing with a friend, and he was in a cruiser. Cap 3 caps did some damage. Next thing you know, at the end of the battle, even though I was doing all the carrying in a battleship, his average experience was like 3,000. And I think I just got like 1,800. So it was just like, oh wow, the caps are pretty crazy there. So, that's definitely a thing. If you really want to try to win that contest, do lots of capping. It is actually good. And of course, do some damage as well. That's still important. Anyways, the second contest that's active right now on the EU server is building a paper ship, which I think you're supposed to take paper and make a ship using paper. Something like that. And from what I can tell, the prizes are really, really nice. I mean, if the first prize winner gets a nice, a package of things, you get a headset, a GTX 950, and a Turpitz, which is like amazing. I mean, even for prizes 9 to 15, the prize packs for 9 to 15 is awesome. You get a Nikolai and you get a mouse pad, which is pretty damn sweet. Again, link in the video description with more details. Both contests on EU run till December the 31st. Alright, so on to the next sort of minor-ish topic, which is the upcoming patch. There's a new patch on the horizon, patch 5.2. I can't talk about it too much, as I'm still under the non-disclosure agreement, so that means I can't be talking about anything that we're really doing. But some people have mined the data, at least what's available right now, and they have put it out into the public on Reddit and things like that. So I think that would be fair game for me, at least to talk about certain things. One of the things I see is that people are really, really concerned about the fact that the rudder shift times for battleships are getting adjusted again. So it's going to increase. And there's this worry that, oh boy, this is going to make battleships very, very vulnerable to torpedoes, especially since destroyer torpedoes are getting a detection buff. So they're going to become more stealthy, the torpedoes. They're going to be harder to spot. And people really, I think, are pretty worried about that. And I have to say, okay, I understand that there are concerns, but I have to say that, you shouldn't really freak out too much because there's also other changes happening. For example, from tier 8, 9, and 10, where originally everybody just got the concealment module, the acquisition module might be more useful with the changes to torpedo detection. So it might give more detection to see torpedoes earlier, and especially when you're dealing with torpedo ships like the Shimakaze, for example, spotting their torpedoes earlier especially with the less maneuverable battleship, might give you a chance to take very few torpedoes or just to simply get out of the way. That's something that I think we'll have to see when patch 5.2 goes live. There's a whole bunch of other stuff with regards to 5.2, but I'm not going to talk about it yet until it goes live. When it goes live, I'll talk about it more, just because right now, there's no point. We don't know what the final changes are going to be. So I'm kind of going to leave that topic alone, and when 5.2 actually does go live on the live server, then I'll talk about it in more detail. I'll make a video and everything, talk about it. Okay. But let's talk about the game, because that is kind of important to me today. Just talk about the game, tell you guys what the state of the game is, at least what I think about it. And the truth of the matter is, I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns with the direction that World of Warships is going. And I'm not really sure how many of you people feel the same way about this. And, please do tell me in the video description below. Present your concerns. Talk about it. Share your concerns. I'll read your comments and I'll answer them in the next video if I get around to it. So anyways, this is going to be harsh, by the way, and I'm pretty sure Wargaming isn't going to like me all so much for saying this, and who knows, I might just end up on their shit list or something. But anyways, it's honestly what I feel, and I'm just going to come out and I'm going to say it. One of the more frustrating things as well about all these issues is that I still can't find all the words to talk about all the problems, because so much of the problems right now in warships is this convoluted mess where you talk about one thing, and if you sort of analyze that one thing, you realize that it affects like everything else, and it affects everything else in a way that it's extremely hard to sort of to make it come together in sort of one cohesive, explainable thing. It's this convoluted mess that's going on right now. So, all right, I'm just going to sort of list things and explain them as I go, and just see if you agree or disagree with any of these. My first big gripe right now with the game, my first big issue, is how everything in the game is oversimplified. There is very little that I feel is complex about World of Warships. Everything's simple. Think about AA, for example. AA is simple. It's an aura. That's it. It's just X amount of kilometers in a big circle. This is what your AA can do. There's no manual control. There is nothing. So when planes come to attack you, there is no element of real skill when it comes to dealing with aircraft. There is only how will you sail your ship and how the carrier player decides to play with the planes. So A, I think, is really, really simplified. And so when A is the simplified, for example, the cruiser's role is simply just to stay next to the battleship. There is no active role in defending against planes, except maybe to press their barrage ability. This results, because it is so simplistic, it results in a lot of frustration for the carrier captains when they have to execute so many different things and to get so many things right in order to execute one attack, all for it to be essentially for nothing if one cruiser just happens to go, oh yeah, right, your planes are coming. Here's one press, a simplified press of one button to activate an ability. There is, for example, no need for the cruiser to really do anything else. In real life, ship captains had to say, okay, well, there's planes coming in. I want to either minimize my profile to the planes, or I'm actually going to turn and expose my broadside, but in doing so, I bring max firepower to bear. None of that in World of Warships, so that's really, really simplified. And that's frustrating, because the reasoning, and also the reasoning that Wargaming gives for not implementing anything like that is it's too complex and things like that. Well, I mean, a game like Navy Field was able to implement manual control of anti-aircraft guns, and that AA was challenging, and there was so much to do there with anti-aircraft. You had to calculate angles, calculate where planes were, and it was almost like a full-time job. If you were, say, in a cruiser escorting a battleship, it was almost a full-time job just to defend against planes. But anyways, I'm not talking about Navy Field, just going back to warships for a second. So, like, for example, just that AA being that simplified takes away so much from the game in terms of how ships might maneuver, how ships might counter planes, versus how ships might counter other things. It takes away from that. And that's just one thing. Here's another one, like the absolute awful, simplistic damage control party. You get set on fire, you get flooded, press R button, magic. But after a certain amount of immunity time for the next minute and a half, if you get set on fire again, you're screwed. And that is also combined with the problems with fire and how they work right now in the game. So, like, don't even get me started on fire, because that's another thing that I get really, really angry about, because it's oversimplified. Everything is just simplistic. Why can't World of Warships implement, you could say a battle stations midway, a battle station specific system where you have the ability to task your crew to deal with certain things? Why couldn't that be implemented? Ships are way more complicated than tanks. Yes, tanks, there's a crew of 4 guys in a vehicle. If they get hit, and there's only so much they can do. If they get set on fire, there's only so much they can do. The ship had so many people, and there were even dedicated damage control parties for all of those things. And I don't know, I feel like that in itself is really simplistic, just to say, oh right, I'm on fire, press R, done. You can't task anybody to deal with a fire. So that, for example, as an experienced battleship captain, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I have one fire, I'll leave it. I'll let it burn. I'll let it burn, hoping that I don't get set on fire, repeatedly after I hit the repair. So, I don't know, just that for me is really simplistic. The HP system, for example, is really simplistic. And in HP, you've got right now just an HP bar, and the HP bar diminishes as you take damage, and only certain ships have the ability to recover it through a repair kit. So that's what I think causes a lot of rage, for example, against carriers back in the day when they were able to nuke ships, because massive alpha damage against the battleship, nothing the battleship could do. And that's being caused by, again, a simplified HP system. If the HP system was more dynamic, where a carrier would be able to hit your torpedoes and you would be able to take immediate damage for a certain percentage, and the rest of it your repair crew or damage control crew could take care of over time or something like that, that would make things more interesting as well. But do we have anything like that? Absolutely not. We, again, like I said, have this very, very simplistic HP system. And you can start to tell that all of these little things, they impact other things as well. The reason why battleships complained about carriers was because of an overly simplistic HP system, an overly simplistic damage control system, etc. And then, of course, this has led to, let's say, massive nerfs against carriers by giving cruisers this barrage ability, which makes it less fun for carriers to play, because a simple one click of a button can negate an entire strike that you've spent so much time trying to set up. Just really, really frustrating. Think about this next thing as well. Non-controllable scouts, and also the fighter scouts. You press a button, scout gets launched, they fly above your ship, they circle around, and you can't direct them to anything. They might intercept an incoming attack. They might scout out something that's coming your way. It seems so simplified. There is no skill for a cruiser player or a battleship player to even worry about scouting. Okay, so you might say, alright, so battleships shouldn't have a controllable scout because it allows them to spot torpedoes and destroyers and allows them to engage. Fine, fair enough. What about cruisers? Cruisers are naturally supposed to be the destroyer's enemies. That's if the cruiser can ever actually see that enemy. Now, with the earlier changes and a number of things that have taken, for example, the carriers out of the game, a lot of the times you will never spot that destroyer. A destroyer, if it's well played, can stay permanently invisible to you. Forever. And ever, and ever, and ever. And as a cruiser, you're just going to get frustrated. Hell, it's at tier 10, for example, against well-played shimas in a cruiser. Good luck. You're never seeing them. And if the cruiser's job was to engage destroyers, then give cruisers control their scouts so that a destroyer knows that if a cruiser is nearby, it's going to be difficult for them to get close. So you have that issue. You've got the issue where, for example, and for CVs, mind you, you have the issue where if you're engaged by a fighter scout, you can't disengage. If your fighters get tied down by a fighter scout, good luck, because you could have 6 fighters being taken down. Okay, not really taken down, sorry. It can be tied down. My bad. There we go. That's a better word. It's 3:30 in the morning, folks. I'm going to make mistakes. They're going to get tied down by a single fighter, and they can't disengage. Their only choice is to shoot down that fighter. And if it happens to get caught, if your fighter squadron happens to be caught in the AA bubble, of a cruiser or a battleship or whatever, you could lose a sizable chunk of your squadron before you're able to take down that fighter scout and get out of there. But then all of that is, again, super random, because that thing could just jump on you because it's just in a circle zipping around, and by chance it jumps on you, by chance it's not even there. That's another issue. What other issues are there? And speaking of aircraft micromanagement, there's another one. Fighter on fighter. I'm a carrier, you're a carrier, my fighter engages your fighter. What do we do without fighters besides click on each other? Nothing. There is nothing that can be done, and whoever has more planes in that squadron, if it's a one-on-one, whoever's got more planes and got the same tier planes is going to win. There is no skill, there is no outplaying things, nothing can be done in that particular regard, which means that if you happen to be in a Japanese CV and you happen to get tied down by US CV's fighters, good chance you're going to lose your fighters. Again, really simplistic, no skill required. And talking about spotting destroyers, for example, spotting, the whole spotting system, super simplistic. Once a destroyer is spotted by aircraft, and this is one of the destroyer's complaints about carriers, oh, they can stay on top of me and just follow me everywhere. And that's because that's it. That's how spotting works in the game. If a plane's over your head, you're spotted, unless of course you're under smoke, but smoke only lasts so long. But plane over your head, you're spotted. Nothing a destroyer can do. There's no additional concealment abilities or places or anything like that in the game right now. There's no rain squalls, no weather, none of that. And when I say weather, I don't mean weather in the sense of like massive waves that are going to screw things up. Because, by the way, if you have massive waves in the game and that affects the ships, good luck ever hitting a citadel there, because you're never going to know where the water line is. But there's no rain squalls. There's no additional concealment. Even if you think about, like I mentioned before, this problem, even if you think about World of Tanks, a light tank, for example, has so much more than just its concealment or its spotting range compared to other things. It's got bushes, it's got all these other things, it's got buildings and trees and all these other things. In World of Warships, the islands don't play as big of a role as some people would like to think. But, aside from that, that's it. The destroyer's only ability to hide is detection. And that means plane over your head, you're spotted. It also, I think, presents that sort of frustration for battleships as well, because if a plane comes after you, unless you have the right amount of AA, there's nothing else you can do. There's no concealment you can use. There's no additional things you can do to protect yourself. Frustrating. That's pretty frustrating. In all of these things, this oversimplification causes issues in the game. Because what happens is one thing affects this ship, that ship's issues affect everything else, and everything else ends up affecting every other thing. And it's just this huge convoluted mess that is extremely hard to untangle. One other thing that is also an issue, and this I think is the second biggest issue, is the fact that randomness in this game plays as big of a role as it does. One of the goals, by the way, of wargaming is to turn World of Warships into an esports. And I just shake my head at it, because I cannot, for the life of me, see how Warships will make a good esports game. Because so much is dependent on RNG. Because you could sit there, and you could engage an enemy battleship, broadside to broadside even, and you fire a salvo, and you keep firing a salvo. And what you'll find is that you'll fire a salvo, and oh wow, 5 Citadel hits because RNG favored me and gave me a super tight spread, and I put it all in there. And then on the next salvo, aimed at exactly the same way, RNG is like, yeah, I don't think I like you too much. Here's your salvo going all over the place, and you're looking at it and like, okay, wow, I had one penetration there, and the rest all landed either short or long. I do not see how this would make for a good esports game, because esports participants, I think, want a certain degree of reliability out of what they have. Some way to minimize that randomness element. But Warships right now, massive randomness element. Think about the fighter scouts I was talking about earlier. That's a randomness element as well, because think about it this way. If you're playing a destroyer, and you do sneak up on a battleship, and you're not detected, and you fire off your torpedoes, and your torpedoes are tracking nicely, and the battleship is initially, let's say, unaware. Random element here. Does the fighter scout patrolling that battleship circle over your torpedoes? Yes? No? Because If they don't, because they just happen to be some RNG purpose on the other side of their flight path, well, then your torpedoes aren't spotted until, of course, the spotting range, and then, of course, the battleship reacts. Or you get totally unlucky, and this fighter scout just happens by chance to fly over your torpedoes, and bam, from kilometers away, the torpedoes are detected. If I was a destroyer player on an esports team and I was playing in a competitive environment, and that's what negates an attack, I would freaking rage, because that is just how annoying that randomness factor is in this game. It just plays too big of a role. It plays way too big of a role. I'm not saying there shouldn't be randomness, but it should not be to this level of randomness. You cannot just get the same kind of thing. I've played, for example, Battleship, and there's some days where I fire a salvo and I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful salvo. How did I get that? And then there are other times I fire a salvo and it's like, oh, wow, what happened there? If you watch even this replay that I've got going right now, there's this one time where I completely screw up a salvo on a battleship. Completely. Like, my shots just don't go anywhere near it, and you just watch this one random shell. There's just completely one random shell just fly somewhere, boom, into a citadel. I get only one hit out of the entire salvo, and it ends up in the citadel of a ship. It's like, first of all, that's not really much fun for me, because I'm looking at myself and going, wow, you were that bad at that shot? Like, how did you aim that? And then the enemy battleship, oh yeah, it's actually that salvo. You see that. All of them fell short. One of them just happens by chance, boop, into the citadel there. It's like, how's that fun for the opponent either? Because it's like, you know, the enemy battleship might get a random citadel, might get a penetration, might get a bounce, might completely miss. It's too much randomness. Even on a defensive note, for example, with armor angling as well. It's like you angle your armor. Everything looks good. First salvo the enemy fires, you see all the shots bounce. You think, okay, I'm in a good position, good angle right now, no issues. And then the next salvo, it's like, gets fired, and next thing you know, you're like, oh wow, I took double citadels in the frontal magazine. How the hell did that happen? It's like, you know, I'm angled exactly the same. The enemy is angled exactly the same. What the hell changed? You look at, for example, World of Tanks. There's a consistency level there. You take an IS-3, for example. You side scrape it, reverse side scrape it against the wall. And you can have, you know, an enemy tank destroyer sit there and fire at you in the same spot, shot after shot after shot after shot after shot, and nothing will happen. And that's the great thing about World of Tanks. There is that level of consistency. World of Warships, it's like, nope. Who knows what'll happen? So everything I've said, let's just present one example. And I'm going to give the example of carriers. It's the class that, first of all, I think I'm most well known for. And second of all, it's the class that I think I really took it to the limit, first of all. And not only that, but it's also been the class that's been affected so much that these days I barely touch it. In fact, I don't think I've played, well, I've maybe touched the midway, but I don't think I've ever played a consistent series of midway games in the last little while. Haven't touched my Japanese CV. I've got up to Hiryu, and I don't think I've touched it since. So let's go back, first of all, and let's just talk about carriers and what led to the changes. So you think back to carriers. Carriers used to be played by probably some of the most skilled players in the game. The people who figured out so much about the ship. And then what happened is that the game went live, people came in, and these carrier players who had all that experience were all of a sudden given like 1,000,000 new seals to club. And they did. They clubbed them hard. And they clubbed them without any degree of remorse. And these new players went, holy crap, these carriers, right? Not only that, but statistically, these carriers became really, really, really an extreme because they were able to set numbers way higher than any other ship. So, nerfs. Nerfs changes, tons of things happen there. So, for example, squadron compositions, right? All U.S. carriers up to Tier 8 now no longer get dual torpedo bombers. One torpedo bomber squadron and some fighters thrown in there, and some dive bombers thrown in there. Japanese carriers have been changed. No more real strike loadouts in Japanese carriers. They've got balance, they've got a fighter configuration, but no strike anymore. The Army Ranger torpedoes constantly get changed. The spreader torpedoes get changed. The speeder torpedoes get changed. There's so many changes. Then you couple this with like the cruiser barrage ability, where a carrier can work really, really hard trying to set up an attack. Cruiser presses one button, strike ruined. Might even lose most of your squadron. Hell, I mean, when you talk about squadrons, losing 50% of your squadron, that's substantial. Because once you lose 50% of your squadron just going in, do you keep going? Because even if you get in there and you do execute a strike, you might only get off one torpedo, maybe two. If you decide to pull out and you save 3 bombers, on the next time you go in, you're going to lose some more. It's just a silly system. So the carriers get frustrated. They get really, really frustrated. And the result is, if you look at the game right now, how many carriers do you see? I can play many, many, many battles. Tier 5, Tier 6, Tier 7, Tier 8, 9, 10. And I might run into a carrier, but it's at such an infrequent pace that I'm almost confident saying that there's just not that many carrier players left. Hell, I mean, in ranked, how many carriers did you guys see? I played all the way up to rank 1. I played it in a battleship. Because I knew if I played a carrier, what I would really be doing as a carrier. And it's truthfully not much. You know? And so much of this is these oversimplified mechanisms that have taken away all these different elements of the game. You've got, for example, AA as that sort of automatic aura. You've got the HP system, which is just super simplified. You know, all damage is massive alpha damage. There's just nothing a battleship can do, so battleships rage at that. They get angry. The A barrage ability, the catapult fighters, all those things, they cause massive frustration for CV players. The super simplistic squadrons to the point where you have no flexibility. That led to carrier sniping, which Wargaming still hasn't been able to solve. And the carrier sniping led to CV players not enjoying the game because they knew that all they were going to deal with is getting sniped at the very first start of the game. And whichever team lost their CV, that was frustrating for them too because they were just going to get stomped by the other carrier. It wasn't much fun. So next thing you know, substantial decline in CV playing population. I think on NA server right now, I just don't know how many CV players are actually playing right now compared to all the other ships. If you look at the queue, you could see 20 battleships and you'll see like one carrier sitting in the queue waiting for a battle. And I know right now there are people who are listening to me saying this and going, good, great, we've lost carriers, fantastic. They shouldn't have been in the game anyways, those damn Sky Cancer ships, those damn RD wannabes, whatever you want to call it. And you might be applauding that, and you might be saying, fantastic, that's a great thing. But let me tell you that it's actually turned into a terrible thing because it's gotten to a point right now where, for example, the entire USN cruiser line has essentially no purpose right now. All the people who went up a US cruiser line, what's their purpose? Their job used to be AA. Their job was meant to protect the larger ships of the fleet against carriers. Now they don't have a job. And they don't have a job, and compared to every other nation's cruisers right now, both the Germans and the Japanese, they have better cruisers because they've got the ability to deal with heavier ships with their torpedoes. They can at least do that. They've got arcs that make them usable against ships at longer range. What do the U.S. cruisers have now that's useful? Nothing. There is just no point. Top tier destroyers now, for example, like the Shimakaze. Well-played Shimakaze can stay completely invisible entire game, throwing torpedoes. Never get spotted. Why? No carrier. No carrier at all. Battleships, if you were in a battle, you would never get that ability to spot anything. And of course, remember that oversimplification of scout planes I told you about earlier as well? No way for cruisers to hunt down the destroyers either. That's a problem, right? Yeah. I mean, just frustrating problem. Battleship combat itself has turned into something extremely static. How many times at all tiers, and especially when you get to tier 10, have you seen battleships just get somewhere, angle their ship, stop their ship, and start backing up slowly? Think about the Yamato captains out there that do this. They just sail up somewhere, stop their ship, angle it, and use their 4 guns to fight. That's it. And the reason they no longer have to move, and there's a reason why so many ships don't have to move these days, is because there is no carrier that's going to come and punish you for sitting still. And so World of Warships in so many occasions feels like World of Tanks, and this is my problem, is it's not supposed to be. Naval warfare was never supposed to be that. Naval warfare is supposed to be fluid, dynamic. There's supposed to be a certain degree of maneuver, a certain degree of positioning. There's supposed to be all this, and there just isn't. In ranked battles, for example, so many occasions in ranked battles where all you see the battleships doing is sailing into position, stopping, engaging with forward guns, or angling in such a way that they're just nicely angled and firing with their side guns. And as long as they've got a destroyer in front somewhere, they're not worried at all about enemy destroyers. Nothing's going to make them move. And all of these problems are caused essentially by one class going to the point where it's not playable anymore. And that's what you're beginning to see. That's what you're beginning to see in the game right now, is that these problems are so convoluted and so sort of interwoven with everything else that it's hard to describe the exact problem, because there's just so many things that are wrong. And not only that, but the solution to fix them is incredibly difficult as well. What do you do with carriers right now? I mean, you can't return them to their former position, make them OP again. That makes no sense. You can't go down the current path, because the carriers just get to the point where nobody wants to play them, and that has massive ramifications for this game as well. It's just, I don't know. There's just so many things right now that aren't right. And the reaction from wargaming has been confusing. Like, I'm no longer sure, for example, what they want their ships to do. I'm not sure by, for example, keeping HE and fire the way they are right now. Like, do they want their cruisers to be involved in a battleship engagement all the time? Is that what they want the cruisers to, like, I don't understand that. I don't understand what their role for carriers are going to be. You know, okay, if you want to make carriers support ships or whatever, then reward them for that. But nope, still don't see that either. There's just things that aren't right. There are just things that are not right with the game. And this is really the state of the game right now. And I'm worried. I'm concerned. I'm concerned with the way the game is right now, because there are just moments where I look at World of Warships and I go, I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't know what you're trying to become. Are you trying to take a very, very fun, a potentially very, very fun game, and trying to turn it into something else? I get wargaming as arcadey. I accepted that a long time ago. I understand that. But even arcadey games, there are still elements of skill and complexity and depth and all that. And I think that's the reason why World of Tanks, I think, has been a really, really successful game. World of Warships, it used to be better. Now it's less and less so. So to sort of sum it all up, you know, the things I'm worried about Warships right now, and where wargaming is going with this game, is that I just don't understand what they intend anymore. You know, there are times where you see a change get proposed and you go, why did you guys do that? Like, I understand that developers have access to statistical data that players will never see, but it doesn't change the fact that those of us who've played this game for a very long time understand things about this game that I'm pretty sure even the developers themselves are maybe not aware of, because their job, after all, is to develop. Yes, they play it, but they're never going to play as many games as we are. You know? And I think that's the reason why, if you look at other companies, especially other companies who want their games to evolve into esports, they spend a lot of time listening to their top tier players. Valve did it with CSGO. Blizzard does it with StarCraft 2. I mean, Riot does it with League of Legends. Wargaming, I don't understand, just doesn't seem to want to listen to the players who understand the game very, very well. I don't know if that's just their philosophy to just cater to the lowest common denominator. I'm just not sure about that anymore. But I am pretty confident saying that if they did listen to those of us who have played this game, you know, and do understand this game, that we would have a much better game on our hands. Anyways, so, you know, let me know what you all think. You know, I apologize in this episode I didn't answer any questions from last week's episode, but, you know, leave your comments in the video description below, and I will reply to those comments. And, you know, let me know what you think, let me know how you feel, and that pretty much wraps up all the things that I'm thinking about today. So have a good one, have a good week, and I look forward to talking to all of you in the comments. So take care, see you on the high seas.